Welcome to the Secret Job Society podcast, where we interview people with unique or little-known professions. Join in as we peel back the curtain on these niche, fascinating roles and the humans behind them, showing how they found meaning and purpose in truly unconventional ways.
Hello, everyone. It is your girl, Kristen, with the Secret Job Society. And on this week's episode, we sit down with Heather Honnold to talk about her journey to becoming a death doula. What is a death doula? What exactly do they do? I kind of found out about this profession a couple years ago. I actually took an online information session to become certified as the death doula. And although it wasn't a part of my journey at the time, I found the career to be fascinating. I did a little bit of research prior to the episode, and I actually found some interesting information about how being a death doula turned into a profession. I'm going to read that to you. The role of death doula became to take shape as a paid profession in the early 2000s, but the practice of supporting the dying has existed in many cultures for centuries. After World War II, death in the U.S. became increasingly medicalized, often happening in hospitals rather than at home, leaving families feeling unprepared and disconnected from the process. In the 1970s, the modern hospice movement emerged, emphasizing dignity and comfort at the end of life. Around this same time, the rise of birth doulas showed us how powerful non-medical emotional support could be. And people began to ask, why not at the end of life too? As baby boomers started caring for aging parents and reflecting on their own mortality, the demand for more personalized, holistic end-of-life care grew. Death doulas stepped into that role to fill that gap, offering emotional, spiritual, and practical support for the dying and their loved ones. Today, they're a huge part of a growing movement to reclaim death as a meaningful, supported transition on our own terms. This episode does contain descriptions and discussions of death and dying. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Secret Job Society. Today, we have Heather Honnold with us. She is a death doula, end-of-life doula.
Yep,
What's
either
your
way,
preference?
it depends on other people's preference.
Okay, awesome. She is an end-of-life doula, and we are so excited to have you on the show today. So thank you for saying yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First things first, what is an end-of-life doula? Can you tell us about that?
Oh, it's different for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it is educating people about death and the process of dying, and what if someone is diagnosed with a terminal illness, what they might expect. It is support in grieving. It is preparing for end of life. It's just like a birth doula, right?
Mm-hmm.
So supporting the dying person and their loved ones in any emotional, spiritual capacity, just not medical.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you always wanted to do this?
No.
How do we get here?
It's a winding road.
That's all right. We got time.
I started out wanting to be a chef, and I have a very logical mind. And I realized in high school that I believed that I could not be a chef because I couldn't make enough money. So I went into accounting because that seems like a stable job.
Wow.
And so I kind of just got into an office admin capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Young, I didn't go to college right away. And then I got a job in accounts payable and worked my way into real estate. I worked as an accounting person in a real estate company. And then my mom died, and I became a transaction manager for real estate. And I spent over 20 years doing that. And I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it because I didn't feel like I was having enough of an impact on people. And that's really important to me. So I started in like 2012, kind of exploring more spiritual things. And my mom was a very woo-woo kind of person. She was into crystals and all those good things. And so I just kind of started studying different things. And in 2013, a friend of mine who I didn't know very long, but she and I became very close, and she came to work with us, and it was just a divine series of events. She had previously beat cancer, and it came back, but she didn't tell anybody. She told us, the two people that she worked with, and one friend, a neighbor, who turns out that her neighbor had lost her job, so she was kind of taking care of her.
Beautiful.
And one day I called her to see how she was, and she was in the hospital. She said she couldn't breathe. And so I went to the hospital, and she had to have surgery the next day. And her friend couldn't be there because she had somewhere else to be. So I was there, and I waited for her. And when she came out on a ventilator, like she couldn't breathe. And the doctor was yelling at me, why did she let it get this far? And I said, she wasn't going through the treatment again. She was not going to do that. And I am an advocate for people in general. Of course. And I immediately went into mama bear mode. And I had to get on the phone with her family. They not only did they not know that she was on a ventilator, they didn't know her cancer had come back.
Of course.
And I had to tell them, this is not what she wants. You cannot do this to her. And I had crystals on her. And I remember the doctor saying, I really hope if I'm ever in this situation that I have a friend like you. And I didn't it meant something to me, but it didn't really impact me. I just knew that I was good with death. I have this relationship. When my mom died, same thing. I kind of just go into a mode of, I do believe that death is a part of life, right? And I believe that it is a sacred part of life. And death is bad for the people who are left behind, right? Of course, there are people who suffer from illness, but death itself is the worst for us. Yeah. And so kind of it's like a selfish aspect of it that we all have. We all go through that. So again, it meant something to me, but I didn't think I'm going to be a death doula. Yeah. I didn't know it existed. No. Okay. No, but I wanted to know how I could help people. Okay. And then a few years ago, I finally left my job. I said, I cannot do this anymore. And I went into the crystal healing and more coaching and things like that. And then in 2020, my dad died. He got sick. And it was right before COVID. It was February. And so I got to go through, when my mom died, she died in a car accident. So it was instant. It was just that. But my dad was sick. And I was in the hospital with my sisters, and he didn't have any of his plans in place, of course. And having to kind of guide myself and my family through it. And it comes naturally. It's just, it's not what I chose. It chose me. And so after he died and COVID came, and I realized, because my dad died in a very similar manner to people who were dying of COVID. And what hit me the most was that we got to be there with him. And there were so many people who didn't have that. Yeah. He was never alone for the 3 days that he was in the hospital. And also part of that, and part of my service offerings as a death doula, is I do advanced care planning. Okay. And I teach a lot of classes about that because it's so important for everybody. And people don't want to talk about death, and my dad didn't have any wishes written down. And, we had to go through his house and deal with paperwork and, what would he want? And making decisions for him that weren't ours to make. Yep. Right. And I think of it in the way of that. I know with all of my being that we made the right decisions, but I still think about it and I still wonder, and I want to educate people so that they understand what it does to the people left behind, because now I don't have time to grieve. I'm going into, I have to take care of all of the things that come along with death. And then on top of it, I have to deal with the salespeople of funeral homes. Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
And that's a traumatic experience all on its own. So I said, I am going to make sure people don't have to go through this. Yeah. And so I started doing research of how I can do that. And end of life doula, death doula came up, got training in a couple of different places because I'm a learner. And I didn't think one was enough. One was a little too spiritual and woo-woo like, and one was run by a hospice nurse. So I got all of the medical stuff
side,
and knowing the processes that people go through with different illnesses.
Makes sense.
And so here I am, and trying to educate people about death and getting people to talk about it.
So you're more like preventative in the sense of before or knowing this is coming, you get involved, make sure affairs are in order as in addition to offering comfort.
Yes.
Do you go in and out of hospitals as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. And I also work with people who are not sick and just kind of offer doula services that are people that elder
Advanced care planning.
Exactly.
You can do it in your 20s.
Exactly.
Healthy as an ox.
And as you should.
Right. That's a whole other conversation.
I'm very passionate about that one. But yeah, just I would love for the ideal situation is if someone is either finding out that they're dying or their loved one, I want to come in right away and educate them about what to expect. And if I don't hear from them again, or if I don't hear from them again for 6 or 8 months, great. I talk to people on the phone, like maybe we're not in a constant relationship, but I've gotten calls of, my loved one is experiencing this right now and I don't know what to do. And I can remind them, but you do, and it's that grounding presence.
Totally.
You mentioned that very first encounter where the physician said, if I'm at end of life, I would want your service. That intrigued me, because being hospital based where I do my clinical work, things happen very fast. 90 some odd % of the time, nothing is pre-planned. Right. And typically we bring in the palliative, hospice, medical side, which are very med focused, comfort med focused, make sure they have no pain. It comes in at one angle. Right. So what was it about that interaction with that physician that made him say that?
It was the fact that I fought for her. The fact that I spoke up. I wasn't going to sit and listen to her say, well, you should have done this or she should have done that, because she knew what she wanted. She knew that she was going to go out on her own terms. And that is her absolute right.
Yeah.
And I fully support that and I will fight for that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what it was. It was just the fighting and advocating for her. And that's, it's important. People don't know, for when we talk about advanced directives, just briefly with healthcare power of attorneys, you might not necessarily want to choose your spouse. You want to choose someone who's going to fight for what you want.
Similar to a trust, like you don't want your family, you want a fiduciary.
Exactly.
Similar concept.
Yeah. So. I don't know if my mom would want to make some of the decisions that I have in place for me, which is super important to know.
And that's why, like, when I teach people, part of that advanced care planning is having the conversation with your family and all of your family all at once, so that everybody's on the same page. Because I have had, a son say, well, mom told me this, and the daughter say, mom told me that. So we're having this conversation together and everybody is on the same page and there are no questions.
Okay. So typically at what point do people call you?
It completely varies.
Really?
It really varies a lot. And I've only been doing like the death doula stuff for like a year.
Okay.
So, and again, people don't want to talk about death.
Of course.
And people are not out calling death doulas. So, that's
our first few episodes, however, all have some death slant to it.
We have
it wasn't by design. But
exactly. I feel like we're both very like death positive though. Like it's not something that we shy away from talking about, because like you said, death very much is a part of life.
It's the only two things that every single person in the world has in common, and that is birth and death. And 100 years ago, death was not a medical experience. It was a spiritual, ritualistic experience.
Wow.
And people did talk about it and plan for it and have, these big ceremonies. And
but both birth and death have kind of turned into medical experiences, which as a medical provider, I find it wrong. Both. I mean, there's a need for both.
Of course.
Family can't handle complex circumstance and tubes and surgeries, and obviously. And on the birth side, same thing, but most women are able to, have natural birth. So, there's a time and place for both. And like all things in life, the more you prevent, I feel, the better prepared you are. And to your point, everyone goes through these. It's not really that foreign.
It's just a matter of when.
Totally.
And that's what a lot of people don't want to talk about it, because I don't want to put it into the universe. And I can get that, because I am on the more woo-woo side, if you will. And it's already out in the universe. It's already planned, right? Yes. It's just when. And, I'd love to hear from your perspective as a doctor, like, it's really your sole job to keep someone alive at that point, right? Whereas maybe it's not meant that they stay alive, right? It's more suffering for a lot of people.
I've actually, ironically, Kristen and I talked about this. The most eerie aspect of being a physician till this day is pronouncing someone dead. I don't like it. Do I have to do it? Yes. From time to time. And it's very eerie. But our mindset is, keep them alive. And the worst of the worst, no offense to my oncology friends, but often there's this notion that, well, we can try this next, we can try that next. And it's like, things are futile. When do you stop? But as a physician, you don't stop. Let me just check your labs one more time. I can correct. Let me give you some more fluids. You're going to feel better. And, but the hospital that I round at has a very good, robust palliative care program. And again, that's kind of why some of the differences, and this to me is interesting, because in the medical community, we know what palliative care is and hospice is. But again, it's meds, comfort meds. But a lot of the concepts are just to allow natural death. And so we make a huge effort as hospital-based docs to get people to be do not resuscitate when it's futile. Nobody wants someone to pound on your chest and crack your ribs, and just, it's not right. And to your point, what you did with your friend, a lot of these treatments, especially on recurrent cancer, is not going to do much, but at the last end of your life, you're going to end up being sick as can be. You're going to look your worst. So you don't want to see loved ones. You have no hair. You're cachectic and skinny and all of these things. So any effort to transition and comfort beyond just medical, I think, is amazing. And there's a huge need. And getting the word out, I think, is very important.
Yeah. And that was with her. She knew the cancer came back, not because a doctor told her. She knew. And she went out and lived her best life. Right. And so with a lot of these treatments, and I'm not saying if you get cancer, you should not get treatment.
Right.
And depending on where you are, maybe it's better just to have an excellent 3 months and live the best possible life in that 3 months.
And die naturally at home.
Yes.
You know, that's
that was how people were doing it.
I have to imagine that death doula is a growing profession a growing profession. Maybe this is something that people would do not really knowing that they were doing it, kind of like you were with your friend. Is there a community of death doulas? Can you reach out to someone if you have questions, or?
There are 2 organizations within this country. One is International Death Doula Association. There are not a lot in the Phoenix area, and I have not met any of them. However, there is a school here that is offering a death doula program. And I have gotten a call from a couple of their students wanting to interview me. Because there are a lot of these certification programs saying, go be a death doula full time. And it does. I work other jobs. Like, I do other things. I have other parts of my business because as a death doula, I'm never going to work with more than one client at a time.
Ooh, that was my question. What is the workload?
Right. And that's why I do other things. I do the advanced care planning, which I can go do anytime, right? But if I have someone who is dying, especially if it's the vigil period and they're really going to die in the next few days, there's nothing that is going to come before that. And I'm never going to battle 2 clients against each other who needs me more. So if I have a client, I can't take on another client.
Wow.
Do you have contracts with like hospice agencies, or?
I don't yet. And that is something that is a good thing to do.
Sure.
I have not. I started with one hospice that started kind of trying to get in the door, and I wasn't really feeling their processes. And
they have their own processes. For sure.
And I am not a salesperson, and it's just not my strength. And I would just I feel for my business, I want to I do free classes, I do death cafes. I just want to educate people, and people refer me.
What's a death cafe?
What's a death cafe? Yeah, same question immediately.
Death cafes are actually really common. It's an international movement.
Oh.
And it's really just people getting together for tea and cake and talking about death.
Wow.
And there's no program. It's just participant led. And it's just people just talking about like why they're afraid or what they're feeling or their experiences. And it's just a sense of community. And I will say that getting people to death cafes is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And I recently, because I refused to do them online, I wanted to do them in person. So I was doing them at my office, and people would sign up and not come. And so finally I decided, all right, I'm going to try it online and see. And I'm just starting that February is my first one online. So
cool.
It's just a safe space, a safe, non-judgmental space, because 69% of people generally don't talk about death.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, only 30
for something that's going to happen to everyone.
Right. Yeah. And whether it's because they're afraid or they're afraid of the unknown, not knowing what happens after death, or because their families and friends are uncomfortable with it. So this, for people who do want to talk about it but have nobody to talk about it with, it's that safe space.
We'd love more information on
that
in February. Definitely.
We can promote. Yeah, for sure. Do you have to have any terminal?
No, it's for everybody. It's just a place to talk about death.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know such a thing existed.
Yeah. It started in, I should know this, but somewhere in Europe.
I'm not surprised.
And of course, right. And it's an international movement. They do it. They do them everywhere. And there's no sales pitch. You know, like I don't promote my business during that time. It's really just, it's not a grief support group or anything like that. It's just a place to talk and be a part of the community.
Wow.
So you mentioned you take one client at a time. So maybe walk us through what that looks like. Let's say someone, to make it easier on the conversation, has a terminal illness. They decided they're going to, as we say sometimes, A&D, allow natural death. And so kind of walk us through that. The family or maybe the patient or whoever reaches out to you, and then kind of what's the process?
Yep. So if the process is if they're just recently diagnosed, say they just get on hospice, I will come in and talk to the family and kind of get a feel for where everybody is and what they understand is going to happen. Because I think most hospice do a good job of explaining, but not a good job. Okay. You know, just different bodily things that happen with certain illnesses. You know, if someone has liver failure, they're going to get really itchy. So I'm going to give them some tips to help with that.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, different breathing happens toward the end of death, and it can be very jarring.
Yeah.
And explaining that, and kind of just, I do speak very matter-of-factly. You know, like I'm very grounding and supportive, and this is, you don't need the fluff. They need to know the details. And then I'm always available by phone. And then some people want me to come in maybe a few hours a day to sit with their loved one. It's, if you look at like a hospice volunteer who does respite care, it's very similar to that. However, those volunteers are really allowed to do nothing for legal purposes and liability purposes, right? So, you know, I will read with a person. I help with legacy projects. So if someone is on hospice, so they're generally in a bed for the most part, I can sit and either do voice recordings. I ask them questions of things that they want to pass down. You know, what can we do together? I coordinate visitation. I also coordinate blocking of visitation I'm very big proponent of if there are people that you don't want when you're dying, then they are not allowed.
Oh, what a beautiful service to provide.
Yeah. So I'm thrilled to have those conversations with people. You know, I have my feelings for myself of people that I don't want around me. And so I'm people don't want to have that conversation. Your family members don't want to say, well, you're not allowed. But I really do believe that when people are dying, they should have whatever they want.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
imagine if we followed that while we were not on death's bed.
right.
We would be happier.
Exactly.
Man.
Exactly. And, just it's a lot of support for the family members, right?
Okay.
And so even just letting them know and helping them to understand that you don't need to force your loved one to eat because they don't need to eat. We have this mindset of you got to eat. But when someone's dying, they don't need the same amount of energy, right?
Yeah,
so if they're not going to eat, but they want ice cream, give them ice cream. I think we get out of that whole mindset that it needs to look a certain way.
Of course.
And different, if you want to say hallucinations that people might have, I don't think that they're hallucinations necessarily. But there's a lot of anxiety around it. And so when mom is, seeing her mother who's already passed and she's saying, I have to go, instead of saying, no, mom, you got to stay in your bed, maybe say, you know what, let me go get your suitcase. What do you want to pack? Because they're not crazy. We're not crazy when we're dying. We're just experiencing something different. And we're just causing more anxiety by fighting what they're seeing or believing.
I'd love for you to get more into that because I feel like you're sprinkling it down, but I want you to dive in because I feel like what you're saying is they are in between different dimensions, things that we cannot see.
That's right.
And I love that you have that perspective and are able to kind of quell those fears. Because I'm sure if a mom, like you said, isn't thinking in that way, they might be like, wait, who are they saying? And they might have some kind of like a tension with their religious beliefs.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's another thing that I work through with people is, people tend to have regrets when they're dying. And people also tend, even if they're very strong in their religious beliefs throughout their life, it's a time that they might start questioning, and sometimes with regrets, maybe we're going to write a letter to somebody. Maybe we'll never send it. Maybe we need to make a phone call to somebody and actually have that conversation. I also am where my advocacy comes in is where there are people, loved ones or not so loved ones of the people who are dying who have unfinished business and they have that right. They think they have that right to come in and finish that business before that person dies for their own. So again, I will try to help people have those conversations. But if that's not a healing thing for the person who's dying, it's not their job to fix the relationship.
That's a good point.
And there are a lot of people with estranged loved ones.
Yeah.
And, it's only right that we get to say goodbye. No, if you had the chance to fix that relationship before and you chose not to, and the same goes for the dying person.
Yeah.
If, for example, this person who's dying, is estranged from their daughter because they were abusive to them growing up, I will reach out to that daughter and ask if they want to meet. But if they don't, I will have that conversation with the person who's dying and say that is not healthy for them and they are choosing not to do that. So how can we resolve that for you? We can write them a letter and I can deliver the letter if the person wants it. But it's not the other person's responsibility to create that resolution because you've had the time to create it. That's
it's funny. We're talking end of life, but to me, these are during life matters.
Conversations.
They should be.
And it just, now we have an end date.
Right.
So do I either hurry up and accelerate it? Do I just forget the whole thing?
Right.
It passed. Interesting.
And that is the number, the top regrets are things that were not said, things that were said, and things that were not done.
Yeah.
So that's why it comes up so often. But what if I have a conscious living program, coaching program for that reason, right? Like, what if we do that now? What if we thought we were dying today? What would we do differently? Let's do it. Let's do it now.
What a great question.
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind, to kind of stay within the topic, but how do you compare what you do with chaplain services? So we talked about the medical, the palliative, the hospice a little bit. But chaplain service, go ahead on the chaplain.
Yeah. Well, I think chaplaincy is a part of it. And I am ordained.
Wow, of course you are.
Right, all of the above.
So I am able to do the spiritual coaching.
Okay.
But a chaplain is going to help resolve, or hopefully help resolve, some spiritual issues. But they can't do all of the other things, or most of them don't do all the things that a death doula does in the education and the logistics kind of stuff.
Sure. I had, one of the works that I used to do previously, I had a department of about 20, 25, and kind of out of nowhere, after a complex surgery, one of our staff members died. And I immediately called the chaplain service, and it really had nothing to do with religion, but the comfort that was provided at the moment was an incredible experience. I'll never forget it. And I felt it helped us all very quickly kind of, come to terms. I mean, of course, some mourned, some cry. Sure. Everybody responds differently. It was a shocking circumstance, but yeah, it's very important. And it had nothing to do with religion, even though it's called chaplain.
Right.
It's spiritual.
Yes.
It's a spiritual. It doesn't matter what your quote religion is, or if you have one. It's that energetics, I guess,
yes,
you want to say, and whatever makes someone comfortable in that spiritual manner. And a lot of times it's just presence.
Totally.
Which I say just presence, and that is very hard for a lot of people because we want to fix things.
Sure.
And sometimes, most times, people are just seeking someone to be with them.
Especially on the doctor side.
Yes.
You can't fix.
Right.
I admittingly do have some of these conversations. It's hard to know. And people will ask, even for some minor reason, to come into the hospital, am I going to die? And I'm like, it's not for me to decide.
Yeah.
This is what's going on. This is reversible, in my opinion. However, this could happen. I mean, even if you're going to get a little procedure on your finger, you could bleed out and die in that paperwork.
It's an infinite possibilities.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
So my question for you is, it sounds like the time you spend with people could range from a 15-minute phone call to a couple weeks even.
Yeah.
What do you do for payment in like such a sensitive situation? How do you handle?
I package it up into like hours.
Okay.
So like a 10-hour package, they pay in advance. I don't do big, long packages because I'm the whole refund thing and all like that. But I'm never going to ask somebody on their deathbed for money.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I work with people through after death.
Okay.
And dealing with the logistics of funeral planning and celebrations of life and mourning and things like that. So if there is anything after that, I will just kind of leave an invoice with the family. But again, I have other avenues of income, so it's really not a huge priority for a couple hours. And that's probably not a very good business mind. But that's my heart.
You're not in it for...
I'm not. I do other things to support my life financially. And I just want to be of service to people.
I can tell. I love that. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful that your other businesses are able to support your heart. Yeah.
I'm lucky, or I'm grateful that I'm a learner. And so I'm a very tech savvy person. I do consulting. Like, there are so many things that I can do to generate the income that I need and focus my attention on this.
Totally. Oh, I feel like we can segue into those things now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say, like, I just feel your spirit, and I feel like you're very, like, a highly aware and sensitive to just not like everything that's physical here. Right. And I feel like that's why you fell into this, or how it found you.
Yes.
And I think it's beautiful that, and similar to a lot of the people that we've been interviewing and us as well, that you are finding a way to live out your purpose. And in this realm, we have to make money to do so.
Right.
But you're making that work in order to serve other people. And I think that's phenomenal.
Thank you.
And as we wrap up this part one of 2-part series. Do you want to maybe give a promotional shout out or how people can get a hold of you?
Yeah.
Yes. My website is heatherhonold.com and it's HONOLD. But I have a free advanced care planning class on there.
Okay.
And I have some other free resources, including how to have family discussions about your wishes. And of course, my newsletter, because I do share other resources and things like that. The sign up for my Death Cafe is on there. You can schedule a free consultation with me. There's tons of resources on the website.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll call that part one.